Good morning. Today's guest on What Makes a Man is a gentleman that needs no introduction. He's my childhood hero. I get to call him a friend and an investor and a colleague now. He's about to see the sport he helped pioneer go to the Summer Olympics in Tokyo in this next month. Tony Hawk, thank you for being on the show. This is such a pleasure. We just got to speak at our keynote, the Bitcoin conference in Miami.
That was crazy. That was my first introduction to crowds since COVID.
And it was a crowd.
It was a crowd.
Yeah. I mean, you literally could not see the back of the audience because it was so packed. And then there were like another 90,000 people streaming. I mean, what a blast.
Yeah, what an introduction. It was fun though. It was great. It was great having your expertise too, because I felt a little out of place. I mean, I've invested in crypto for a while, but I'm by no means an expert.
Yeah,
so to have you
and to be one of the main speakers at a Bitcoin conference.
Yeah, it was a little.
It was intimidating even for me, but I think our talk was about bringing countercultures mainstream, which is something that you are an expert in, and it's why one of the reasons why as a kid I really looked up to you was because I saw the way that you were a pioneer for skateboarding. But you really stuck to who you were. This is something I really want to talk about, something we talk about a lot on this show. But before we get to, where we are today, which is, I think, a very momentous point in both, the history of Bitcoin, but more importantly, the history of skateboarding, I want to go back really to the start, like your childhood, growing up, because obviously skateboarding was nothing like it is today. Like, what was your home like? What were your parents like, family? Was it a normal childhood?
Is any childhood normal? No. Definitely not in the 70s. But I have two older sisters and older brother, and I was the last, and I was a surprise for my parents, and so my sisters were already moving out to college by the time I was born. My brother was still home for a little bit, but my dad was in the Navy. That's how we ended up in San Diego, and that was the end of his career. So he just sort of stayed where his last station was, and
not a bad place to be.
Not a bad place to be, and so, but it was weird. Not weird, but it was different because my parents were old enough to be grandparents. So it was kind of like I was raised by grandparents. Luckily, they had been through everything, every challenge
as a parent
before I arrived.
Right.
So it was like, just keep him busy.
Yes.
Just whatever is, when he finds something, let him do it. And when I found skateboarding, they were very supportive of that because it really did keep me out of their hair.
Because I know like military San Diego can be pretty conservative. Like it's not like the rest of California. Your dad wasn't too strict.
Right. But no, I think my dad had a pretty rough childhood and didn't have much support, so I think he tried to overcompensate for that with his kids. So, my older sister,
like I'm gonna do.
So my older sister was a singer. He would help her schlep the band gear around, get them gigs at places, and then my brother is a hardcore surfer, so he would drive my brother to surf events, at the crack of dawn, and
supportive parent,
very supportive. So when I came around and I was skating, my dad just hopped on board, even though skating was not cool, was not established.
It wasn't a sport per se.
Was not at all, and so it was just this sort of misfit activity. And he saw what it brought to me. He saw that it gave me a sense of self-confidence, a sense of belonging, a sense of identity, and he was supportive of it. And I was young enough that it wasn't like I was choosing a career.
Right. But it kind of quickly became one.
I think, I don't know about quickly. It was such a small community that when I first started and I started competing, I realized that there were only a handful of skate parks in the world, and most of them are here in Southern California. And so I would just go to every single event and compete.
And you're what, 10, 11?
I was, like 11, 12. And so I started rising up the ranks. I started figuring out how to skate the other places because I was really good at my home park, but not so much at the other parks.
Right.
So
because they're all so different.
They're all so different, and some are.
And you learn how to do tricks on certain ramps and different grind boards, and it's just totally different depending on where you go.
Yeah, and back then it was all pools.
Yeah.
And the pools were vastly different. Some were frightening, super rough, way steeper.
Well, bowls are intimidating.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I definitely took, I took my knocks along the way, but I made an effort to adapt to this other terrain because I knew that that's the only way that you're going to make a name for yourself or have any success. Even though, like I said, it wasn't like you were making a living. I just wanted to be out there doing it.
Right.
And I started.
Well, and it was something you were fairly good at, right?
Yeah, yeah. But I liken it to, well, you were really good at hula hoop.
Right. But it wasn't a career.
What does that do for you? Yeah, later in life. And so I rose to the top of the amateur ranks at age 14, and the next step in competing was to go pro. And really all that meant was I ticked the box pro in the entry form to the competition I was entering instead of amateur. It was like name, address, am pro. And then suddenly I was pro.
Right. There was no like officiating body to
there was
determine
there was no champagne celebration. It was just all
big
right, good luck. Now you're
sponsorships,
competing against guys way older than you.
Right. So what were the ages of the guys back then?
So I was 14. Most of the pros at the time were closer to 18, 20. And when you're my age, you look back at that and that's not a great difference.
Yeah.
That is a huge difference when you're 14.
Well, in terms of physicality, absolutely.
Physicality and also like they're grown-ass men.
Yeah.
And I'm this little scrawny dude, but I did pretty well. I got fourth on my first pro event and started to come into my own as a skater. And I think that gave me a boost of confidence. And then eventually, like 2 years later, I was ranked number 1. But even then it wasn't really a living.
Right. It was just this Southern California pastime.
Pretty much, yeah. But by the time I'd say 17, that's when things started to take a turn where it was like there was actual prize money.
Yeah.
There were significant royalties to be made from signature products. And all of a sudden I found myself making a living.
Before we get to that, which I definitely want to get into, I want to talk about like who you were as a kid. So you start skating, really like as like a preteen, and it wasn't a cool activity.
No.
You've mentioned you were bullied.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, also, I mean, just in the 70s, like older kids were ruthless.
Yeah.
And they make fun of your name, they make fun of your appearance, they make fun of stuff way beyond
you were
your
always Tony
control.
Hawk.
I was, yeah, but
is a cool name, but it's kind of weird also.
Okay, well, let's put it this way: in high school, I was Bony Cock, so it didn't feel like it was a gift to have that name. It didn't feel like it was advantageous. It was just more like, oh, great, now I got an easy name to rhyme with.
Yeah,
and people are gonna. So anyway, and so being a skater, that was the furthest thing from cool you could do. Like you were way below nerds on the hierarchy of what's cool in school.
Really?
So yeah,
you were
so
below the nerds.
Absolutely, yeah. So I had to hide my skateboard.
This is when Revenge of the Nerds was like coming
out. Yeah. So I had to hide my skateboard when I would go to school. Like sometimes I would hide it behind the lockers, or I'd hide it in the bushes, or just not bring it at all because I just didn't want that attention. And so I was kind of a ghost in the hallways. But as soon as the bell rang, I was at the skate park until it closed.
And that was your community.
That was my crew, yeah.
But you were also kind of an outlier within the skating community.
Yeah, so when I really got into skating and would turn pro and whatnot, I got a lot of flack for my style because I was more trick oriented, and back then it was all about, it was like Dogtown Z-Boys. How much style do you have? How do you flow? What do you look like in the air? And I was like, I know how to spin and flip my board.
You wanted to do new things.
Yeah, I wanted to do new things. And so that was just not the in style. So I'm in this world, this community that I love. And that already sets me apart from the general populace and my classmates and things like, oh, you still skateboard? Like, grow out of it. And then I fell in love with skateboarding. And then I'm kind of shunned in skateboarding because I have this weird style. So very early on, I learned what it was like to be isolated like that. And I think that kind of, as whatever doesn't kill us makes us stronger, but that kind of helped me navigate later in life through other challenges like being called a sellout, social media, hate, all those things. I was already steeped in people talking shit to my face. So you're not really going to affect me that greatly if you're giving me a hard time on social media.
Well, and it was really it was a very similar experience for me coming into crypto because, I had been this rebel. I mean, I didn't have success at a young age, but I was always kind of like, I also wasn't like even a nerd. I was really like a deadhead stoner, kind of fuck up, getting thrown out of schools and stuff. I was an outlier, in all my communities, even amongst my fuck up friends. And then when I came into crypto, it was the same exact thing. I loved crypto, so that united me with the rest of the people in the industry, but I was like very liberal and progressive, and everybody was like an anarchist and a libertarian. And so like ideologically, kind of similar to your experience in skateboarding, I was very different from the community I had joined. We had this same shared end goal of Bitcoin being adopted. It probably the same as skateboarding, being a real legitimate sport. But the people I was with was very different, and I think that builds a sense of perseverance because talking to you going pro and the money getting real, that didn't last forever, right? You went pro.
Yeah.
You made money for, when is this? This is the 80s at this point?
Yeah. Well, basically I started making decent money as I was a junior, senior in high school, and everyone is trying to figure out what college they're going to go to, what career choices. And I thought, I guess I have a career because I'm making more money than my parents ever did.
Right. And you got yourself a house when
so my dad was getting concerned because he saw that I was making this money and I was spending it wildly because I thought it would never end.
You're a teenager, yeah.
Yeah, and so he said, I think you should invest in real estate and buy yourself a house. And so he co-signed for me to buy a house while I was still a senior in high school.
That's so crazy.
But I hadn't turned 18 yet, so he had to co-sign.
Right.
So yeah, that was pretty crazy.
Did things ever start to get like out of hand? Because when you're that young, you've got money, you probably are, even though you're somewhat of an outlier in the skating community, you're still a pretty cool guy at this point because you're now like, number one ranked skater at this point. Like, was there partying? Like, did you see yourself ever?
Yeah, but it wasn't excessive. I never fell into hardcore partying because I saw how it affected other people that I knew who had a lot of talent.
Well, and that's a big issue in the skating community because I saw that. I saw these guys that started to get really good. They got their first sponsorship deal. Then all of a sudden they're partying, they're drinking, they're sleeping around, and they're not skating.
Yeah, I guess I never thought of skateboarding as a means to an end. It wasn't like it was going to be my springboard into finally being popular or getting to party and meeting girls and things like that. It was more like I just loved doing it, and whatever kept me doing it, that's the path I was going to choose. But of course, you're 17, you live on your own. Like when you're in high school, it's always whose parents are out of town. My parents were always out of town. So my house was the party house for sure. And I was in my senior year, it was pretty light because I had already taken the equivalent of GED, and I had taken advanced courses all through my high school years. So I only had 4 classes that I needed to graduate my senior year. So I got out of school at 11:30 every day. And that helped me a lot just in terms of skating, practicing, things like that. So it wasn't like I was so connected to
that social life.
The social life, yeah.
And so in those few years, you're the number one skater. The skating's kind of emerging as an industry. What did you kind of see your role as? Did you see yourself having a role that was bigger than an individual one as a skater? Did you see yourself as an ambassador to skateboarding, as you would obviously become? Or was it really just like an individual activity at that point?
Well, in those days, especially in the 80s, there's no way I would have had the perspective to consider myself an ambassador. I just wanted to skate and travel and do as much as I could. And the skating died off pretty suddenly in around 1991-ish, 92.
And what caused that?
Mostly it was the skate parks couldn't afford liability anymore. And there were no public parks back then. So all of the skate parks just closed up. That was it. They were done. And so people didn't have any place to go skate. And it was also, skating was always considered a fad in and of itself. So in the 70s, it was, the Dogtown Z-Boys, and it was considered like skating is more of a toy. And then it died off because it was ran its course
like
as a toy.
A small counterculture.
Yeah, it came back in the 80s. A lot of the reason it came back in the 80s is from Back to the Future. Right. And so people got into it, and they were into it for a little bit. Parks closed, and they grew out of it, or they lost interest. So it wasn't until the late 90s that skating really came back in full force.
With X Games?
With X Games, yeah. And then our video game release, that set a foundation for skateboarding's popularity that I feel like has remained to this day. And that's when I started to realize that I might have more of a responsibility to skateboarding, because my name was synonymous with it, mostly because of the video games.
Right.
And I felt like suddenly I had opportunities to advocate for skateboarding in places where no one else had been or had access to, and including media, including endorsements, talk shows, things like that. And so then I realized I can really help to promote skateboarding in general. And I don't think it was ever a conscious choice. It just sort of developed. And in recent years, I feel like it's much more of a conscious choice. Yeah. And I realized that, I'm not trying to make a career from my skateboarding these days. I'm happy that people recognize me for it. I'm happy I still get to do it, and I'm considered relevant, but I'm more happy that I get to be a voice of advocacy for skateboarding, and that I can talk to people about things like the Olympics, but I can also talk to them about why do we hop fences and skate schoolyards. You know what I mean? Because I run the gamut.
Well, it's almost about maintaining that core ethos of what skateboarding is,
right?
Because you can kind of lose track of that, especially as it becomes like an Olympic sport. I mean, that's always something that felt important to me with Bitcoin, was looking at how it started as this very small counterculture, and similarly, that there were these values, as I was saying earlier, that aligned all of us. Like, maybe we didn't have the same philosophies or ideologies, but we saw a brighter, better future with this technology, and we saw these foundational values of decentralization, of like an abstraction from authority that made this technology so powerful. And it's easy to lose sight of as like governments start adopting the technology as a legal tender, or in your case, it becomes an Olympic sport. And I think it's almost natural that for someone in our positions to see, since we've been there since early on, to kind of sustain those early values and still talk about, hopping the fences. It's something that Nigel Houston, who's about to be probably the leading contender for gold in the Olympics, was talking about. He still has to deal with the police when he goes out skateboarding.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, one of our skaters was doing this big stunt a few weeks ago, and we had to figure out the most covert way to approach it, because it's a very public area, and it's like, all right, we're going to be there at 7 a.m. on a Sunday, because that's when we know the least amount of people will be there. And it's not like I'm asking permission.
Yeah, and it's often better to ask for forgiveness than for permission.
Absolutely.
Especially with skateboarding.
Yeah, yes.
Skateboarding, you're often not going to get that permission right away. So, going back to, I guess let's call it the early 90s, would you say there was a low point in your career or in your life, like, a point that feels like rock bottom for you?
The hardest years that I went through were the early 90s. I would say 92 to 94-ish, because I still loved skating. I was still doing well skating. I was still skating well, but there was just no job opportunities, and my income was dropping by half every month because it was all based on royalties, and no one was buying skateboards or skateboard related products. And I had my first child, and it was just like everything was crashing in all at once. And that was probably the most challenging time, but I never wavered from skating. I took some odd. I knew how to edit videos, and I actually had a small editing suite. So I took some freelance work doing that, just to pay the bills. And I would take any job that was involved with skateboarding. I mean, like, for instance, I was a consultant on a soda commercial. I wasn't the one being featured because by that time I was 24. I was too old because they just wanted kids.
Right.
But I was the consultant to talk to the studio of, okay, what is possible? What kind of ramp do we need? How do we shoot this angle? And I just sort of, by sheer force, inserted myself into those situations and made myself available to do that stuff because I wanted to do it in skateboarding. You know, it wasn't like I was trying to make a Hollywood career.
No.
I just needed to make a living, and I didn't want to quit skating.
Well, and that's what it was like in the early days of Bitcoin too. It was like I knew it was this like world-changing technology, but there was no way to make money doing Bitcoin. Like, you know, I had a startup that we couldn't raise money for. You know, I would do anything I could to accumulate Bitcoin. People called me like a Bitcoin millionaire, as if I just like bought Bitcoin one day and got rich. Like, that wasn't it at all. I was a broke college student when I started, so I would like speak at conferences or consult for companies. I would take rent for my house for you know, $1,000 a month in Bitcoin, whatever I could do to accumulate it, because, you know, Steve Jobs has this great quote, or had, which is, you know, half of what makes successful people successful is pure perseverance. That's the only thing that separates them from non-successful people. It's not talent. It's not brilliance. It's literally just the willingness to keep on going.
Yeah. Well, I think skateboarding teaches you that more than anything in the world, the value of perseverance. When you see people skating, you often just see them falling over and over and over. And it's like, what drives them? It's because eventually you're going to make it, and the payoff is great.
Yeah, well, and you may have to break some bones in the process. Like, I remember all my friends always had casts, were always on crutches. Like, that's why I never got really into skating, because, you know, I'm built similar to you, but I think I have a bit higher center of gravity. I'm a bit less coordinated, and I just knew if I started to try to do all the tricks, like, I was happy being able to ollie off curbs. Like that for me was like being able to get around, be a part of the culture. But, you know, if you want to be good at skating, you have to be willing to hurt yourself. There's more physical risk than I would say in a lot of sports.
But I think skateboarding is as safe as you want it to be.
Right. So for me, I've never hurt myself skating, except for the one time I was sketching on the back of a car and they accelerated too fast, and that's the worst. Yeah. That's the worst injury I ever took, because my board got stuck under the wheel of the car and I just got pulled down to the ground, and I was in bed for 3 days.
Yeah, that'll do
it. That was my favorite part in your video games, though, was like sketching on the back of the car.
Yeah, I've learned to not do that to excess.
Yeah,
but I think that also early on I learned through my skating is that I didn't, not that I wanted to, but I didn't mind getting hurt for the sake of learning, and so I definitely had some injuries that I would have chosen not to have in my life. But through the years of getting scraped and sprains and stuff like that, it was obviously worth it to get to that point of figuring stuff out. There were a few freak accidents, bad accidents that definitely make you stop and think why. Step back and reevaluate. Is this all worth it? Right. And in some of those instances, I learned, like, no, I don't need to go that direction with my skating anymore. I can stay over here and have much more longevity.
Well, and I think that's just a broader analogy for life. It's that, you know, there's a reason why they call it growing pains. You can't grow without discomfort. And one thing I like to talk about is how really often the most painful experiences, the biggest mistakes we make, tend to be the most instructive in who we become later in life. So whether it's from, you know, pushing yourself too hard and doing a trick on a skateboard, or making the wrong business decision, that failure or setback can actually be what propels us forward the most.
Oh, for sure. And sometimes you don't realize it until much later.
No, it could take years.
But I think that the other thing I learned, especially through maturity, is to embrace those failures, to embrace those mistakes, even if they're small, because that's what's going to let you grow and evolve.
Absolutely. And for you, I mean, how old were you when you became a father? Because you said 94 was when you first
I was
became?
24.
You were 24. I mean, that's young. Were you married?
Yeah. But we were both very young and not fully prepared for the responsibility.
No, I'm 29. I can't imagine it.
And also, like I said, my career was taking a dive. It was tricky. It was definitely it was hard on both of us.
And so, what did fatherhood, especially at such a young age, do for you as an individual and do for you professionally? How did it change the way you thought about the world?
I think it definitely gave me a better sense of purpose, because all these things I was doing, especially trying to make a living, were because someone relied on me for that now. You know, I was actually providing for someone in that sense, and not just sort of,
essentially it was like there's a form of
we
life
need
that you
to
brought
pay
into
the bills.
Yeah.
Yes, and we need to be clothed and fed, and so
and it could have been easier at that point than at any to do something else.
Yeah, or just to shift gears and fend for myself for sure. But that the sense of responsibility was great, and also it just taught me the value of patience. I mean, I learned patience through skating and perseverance, but really when you become a father, that's when you're most tested with your patience. And are you able to not just tolerate, but see it through and help to be the guidance that they need. And that I can't say it came innately, but I was definitely extremely patient for considering how young and hyper I was.
Well, and I think there's something biological that turns on once you bring that life into the world and you realize.
You would think that, but I've definitely seen that it doesn't always work that way with other parents.
And so how long, if you don't mind getting personal, how long was it until you had another child? Was it with your first wife? Or?
No. Then I had another child in 2001, so 9 years later.
And how long?
Riley's mom and I we split up early on, but
can we just talk about that for a second? Was you have a child, and at what age do you realize that this relationship isn't going to work out?
It was really hard because we both had such separate lives already, and I was still chasing skateboarding career, even though it was very, very meager.
Yeah.
And she had her own group of friends, and we were both trying to be the best parent we could, but it was just, we just weren't, our worlds were not connecting, our interests were not connecting. And I was so fixated on a career still that, obviously I'm as much to blame as anyone. So our relationship dissolved, and then I got into a new relationship and, got married again, and then we had 2 kids, and that's when things got crazy in terms of success.
Right, because then X Games are happening, and then ended the first video game. That's 99, right?
Oh, yeah.
So X Games 96, video game 99. Do you think the second marriage, the kids, was, in a sense, was that almost a stabilizing force given how crazy your career and the industry got? Or was
I hoped it would be, but then I was suddenly thrust into this spotlight and success that I never imagined, nor did I realize what comes with that and what sort of opportunities and how much you're pulled in every direction. Like, I was not prepared for that at all. So, the opposite effect of that is that strains your marriage as well. So, and I just didn't understand how to navigate all of it.
And there was probably there was scrutiny into who you were. It wasn't just about like your style of tricks anymore. People wanted to know who.
Well, that's when I had to. That was when I had to deal with people that were more about saying you're a sellout, because suddenly I was getting opportunities to do big campaigns. McDonald's, Disney, Club Med.
The biggest sponsors in the world.
Yeah, some of them for sure. And then it was like people thought that somehow I had changed my sense of values for
Sold
that.
your soul.
Right. And it was like, well, on the contrary, 5 years ago, or even when I was 16, had McDonald's offered me a sponsorship,
You would have said, yeah.
hell yes.
You like
Right?
McDonald's.
Yeah, I like McDonald's. And like, you know, I just did a whole thing with Subway. I love Subway. Subway was our go-to.
Right. The $5 footlong.
It was our go-to road on tours. Like,
It's sustenance.
it's sustenance and it's consistent.
Yeah, and it's
So,
cheap.
right. And so all those things, it wasn't like I had some sense of like, this is, you know, I only put this on my body or whatever. And then someone offered me money. I was like, oh yeah, I'll do whatever.
Right.
So it was never like that. But at the same time, that's how people perceive you. And then it's like, oh, you've sold out for the man. And it's just like, well, actually, I'm using their marketing dollars in my perspective. I'm using their marketing dollars to promote skateboarding.
Right.
And also to help fund skate parks, because I demanded that anytime I got a sponsorship, a portion of that money goes to our foundation.
Right. And when did the foundation start?
2001.
Yeah, so you, because you had seen what happened when all of a sudden, you know, the skate parks don't have support, as you were saying earlier. You know, when that money dries up, those skate parks shut down, and then there's no place for people to skate. And
Right.
so is that, going back to what I was asking earlier, about being this ambassador, did you feel a sense of responsibility now that you were kind of this poster child to ensure that skateboarding was something that was made available, where the skate park funding didn't dry up anymore? Is that what drove you?
The reason I started the foundation was because right around that time, around 99, 2000, there was this explosion of interest in skateboarding. All kinds of kids were doing it for the first time, and there were hardly any facilities. So, and then I saw that some cities and communities were building skate parks, but they were more affluent cities, and they were terrible facilities because some sidewalk contractor or cement contractor said, "Hey, we know how to build a skate park.
We can get a budget for this.
We can get," and they were the lowest bidder.
Yeah.
And they never had built anything of that sort, and so they were really unfunctional. They were probably worse than plazas or mall parking lots.
Oh yeah.
In terms of skating and facility.
The first drafts for the park in Northampton, where I'm from, this small town in Western Massachusetts, I remember nobody that was almost not a pro could have skated in
Right.
that. It was the bowl was so
Yeah.
deep. The stairs were so long. It was like nobody that hasn't been skateboarding for
Right.
years and wasn't really good could have enjoyed this park.
Well, I'll tell you, it's almost that exact scenario. Is that I went to a skate park grand opening at this town outside of Chicago, and the city council was so proud of themselves because they're hip. We're making a skate park, and so they brought me to the park the night before and let me ride it because they hadn't let anyone skate it yet. The grand opening was next day, and I'm skating around, and it was terrible. It was like the ledges and things were too low to actually do any tricks on. There would be a set of stairs that ended at a wall, and it was obvious that no one who skated
had been part of the
design
process.
this park, had been part of the process. And I remember these city council guys watching me from the fence, and they were so excited I was skating around. And then I was finished, and they said, "So what do you think? What do you think?" And I said, "It's honestly really terrible. I wish I could tell you it's great, but it's kind of unfunctional." And they said, "You know what? That's what all the kids were saying when we were building it." But we said, "Wait till Tony Hawk gets here, and he'll show you how to ride it." And that was the moment. That was the moment I was like, I have to try to do something about this, because this is going to keep happening.
Yeah.
And so that's when I decided to start a foundation to try to bridge that gap from the kids who are going to skate the facilities to the ones who are providing it, but more so to divert funding more to underserved areas, low income areas. And that was it. Those were the bullet points, and let's figure it out.
It was the exact same thing in crypto. When we kind of rebranded Bitcoin to blockchain technology in 2015, 2016, all of these banks, financial institutions, Fortune 500s that had seen some promise in Bitcoin, but then after like Mt. Gox and the price had collapsed, they're like, "Oh, we can't touch Bitcoin." But now they could embrace blockchain technology. They all started their own like internal blockchain divisions, and it would often be like a high level person at the bank or large corporation that was leading the initiative. but they weren't talking to anyone from the industry. And so they were creating all this weird distributed ledger technology, and they were creating implementations of blockchains that made no sense. It was like they kind of had the idea of how the technology worked, but in practice, I would come in as a consultant or just like someone to talk to. And, you know, being like 24, 25, I was like, I get to go speak to like a Fortune 500 board of directors, like, and they'd bring me in. I looked at this, I'd be like, you're never going to use this. This isn't going to work, because people get so eager to adopt something that's hip and new, but they don't actually do the work.
Yeah, well, it's just so they can include on their masthead. Like,
right.
We're cool, we're in crypto.
Exactly.
And that's exactly what the skate parks were like. We're like, hey, we're cool, we have a skate park. Like, yeah, but it sucks.
Yeah, and it's tough because you don't want to discourage the adoption, this acceptance to happen, but at the same time, you have to be realistic. Is this actually going to benefit what I'm doing?
Yeah, yeah.
And so for you, you know, now you're a father. You have 3 kids. You know,
I have 4 of my own and then 2 stepkids.
Wow. This is in the early 2000s.
Oh, no, you're talking about like,
yeah,
I thought you were just saying right now.
No,
because all my kids are pretty much grown up now. So
but early 2000s, you know, you must feel a tremendous sense of responsibility just in every area of your life. Like,
I did, but at the same time, it was just so exciting.
It was so exciting
because it was suddenly like
you were you just stuck in the present moment. You didn't really have too much time to be worried or overwhelmed.
Yeah, I was just going from one thing to the next, and it was just like, and I got lost in it for a while because it was like, we want you to this Hollywood movie premiere. We want you to go to this foundation event or this charity event in Cannes, and it was just like, yeah, I'm going. And then I just got caught up in it, but at the same time, it was crazy. It was exciting. It was unreal, and at some point, maybe a little too late in terms of how I would have. Maybe how I would have preferred my life span or my life story to go, is in that I realized I have to take back my time and I have to prioritize. And that has been the biggest challenge, especially as of late, because suddenly skateboarding is thrust into the spotlight again. You know, it plateaued, never really died, but it plateaued. And now with the Olympics,
it wasn't as cool as it was right when the games came out.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But it was maintaining.
Yeah, no.
And then suddenly through COVID, the interest in skating spiked. It's in the Olympics in next month. I don't know when you're airing this, but and suddenly there's this renewed interest that's even bigger than it's ever been.
Right.
And I'm feeling it, obviously, because I'm still doing it. I'm still out there trying to, whatever, be in the mix. But it's been wild, and it's been a challenge or a test of okay, what, you know, you've set your values to this in terms of how you manage your time, and this is truly putting it to the test. And so it's been awesome, but it's a big challenge.
And let's dive a bit deeper, because, you know, this is so important to me. It reminds me of when we first got connected, which I'll go into in a moment. But, you know, when you do feel that stress, when you do feel overwhelmed, when there's so much exciting, good things, you know, one thing I've dealt with for a very long time, and it sounds like you probably do well with, is negative stress. Like negative stress that I can't control, I can kind of manage because I've been through it. I've spent years dealing with negative stress, just like these like factors that are outside of what I can really have an impact on. That's the sort of stress I can actually manage very well. But what I have a harder time with is positive stress, when there's all these good things happening and all these great opportunities where I don't want to say no because they're amazing, but I do have pre-existing responsibilities. Yeah. and managing that. That for me at this point in my life is the greatest challenge for me, is managing all these things that I'd love to do, but knowing that, you know, I have to have priorities. How do you weigh that? How do you stay mindful and make sure you're really prioritizing correctly?
I choose which projects or which things to get involved with in terms of how much they will resonate and how I feel like they will help skateboarding in general. I'm not trying to just promote myself. Like I live comfortably. I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not trying to make it to the next level of success or fame or finances. But I realize that I do have a voice that could affect change, and I want to be there in those moments to help it along. And sometimes that gets murky. Will this actually resonate or will this not? I'm not too sure, but at the same time, like, I have a pretty good sense for it and what people will react to or people will engage with. It's been fun. It's been fun to have those options.
Right. Well, the optionality is what makes it such a positive experience, but it's also what also allows you to get kind of caught up in it. It's because you don't want to say no to what is inevitably
well, I
good.
mean, like in full transparency, I knew I was going to be in LA today.
Yeah.
I'm doing, I'm meeting a guy that we're doing some charity work with. I just did. Coming to do your podcast. I'm going to do a cameo for an independent movie straight from here, and then Whitney Cummings' podcast. That's my day today.
Yeah, and you know, it's something I try to be super mindful of with you. Is just like, I'm like, when can you be in LA?
But it's like, okay, I know that this is it. We're doing today is the day, the window to get this stuff done. Let's go. Like, I'm on the train and we're making it all happen.
But you're not going to go and miss your son's graduation.
Exactly.
From high school.
Like that's exactly it. My daughter's birthday was yesterday.
Right.
I was home buying party supplies.
Well, and that's one thing I've always admired, but actually more so since getting to know you, is how much you do make that time. You don't miss the things that are most important.
I think the one thing that I can impart on people beyond, you know, following your dream and learning everything about what you want to do is just show up. Be on time. That counts for so much more than you think. Because if you're not on time, you make it seem like your time is more important than everyone else's.
And I will say, you are always on time. You've never been late for anything.
Oh, but I think that also you won't get more work. You know what I mean? Like people won't want to keep working with you.
Right.
If you're not on time, it's just like, that guy's too much hassle.
Right. When we think about our partners for who we want to be ambassadors for the brand, it's not just a calculation of who would like represent Made Man well, like who we can get. It's like, who do we know we want to work with? I mean, that's why you were the first person I thought of for Made Man. Not only do I think you very much embody the brand for us, but I knew, having had you as an investor, you know, that you're someone that you're responsive, you're on time. Like, I can depend on you. You're also not going to have any negative press that harms the brand. But consistency is really key, and authenticity. And I mean, I think you've touched on this a lot throughout the podcast. But, you know, being authentic isn't easy for people. I've learned this from some of the most successful people I know. Some of the most successful people I know, the biggest challenge in their life is being authentic, because often, you know, they're folks like us that have just always done what we love and therefore can really stay true to ourselves. But a lot of people, in order to be successful, in order to make the money that they want, to achieve what they want, they have to set aside who they truly are. And I'm sure you've seen this before, and I'm sure you've seen this with people trying to make it in skateboarding. And sometimes people feel like they have to choose between being themselves and achieving their goals. And, you know, what advice would you give to those people? Because it's not always easy to, you know, be entirely yourself.
Well, I think that for one, you do have to be authentic. You do have to be open and honest about what you're doing. And, that's what people will appreciate, and that's what they will connect with. And
it's
not
a sacrifice worth making.
Yeah, and not just present some fake persona because you think that's going to be what is going to sell more.
Yeah.
Because at some point you're going to be...
Because then you are going to be that sellout.
Yeah, but also at some point you are going to be whatever it is, shown for who you really are, or in a situation where it's like, what is your real deal? And if that's who you have been all along, then that's going to shine through. But I think that the other thing is, especially in skateboarding, now that skateboarding is big and now that there are these opportunities, some people get into it just for that. They only get into it for fame or fortune. And so when they have a taste of that, they don't know what to do next.
Right.
They don't know how to stay motivated.
Because once you have fame and once you have money, if that's what motivated you, you discover that doesn't make you happy.
Yeah,
money and fame don't create long-term fulfillment.
It's not truly fulfilling. So I tell people, just keep challenging yourself. Keep, even if it's something that's uncomfortable, stay with it, because that's going to benefit you in the end, and that's going to keep you hyped and motivated to keep going and to keep doing new things. And I think that's been probably my through line this whole time, is that I just want to keep learning new tricks. All this other stuff, it's amazing, yes, but it's more incidental to the idea that I get to keep skating. And it's funny because through all of this, and especially in the last few years with the success, it has allowed me to skate more than ever. Which you would think that, oh, I'm too busy, I can't do it. It's just like, no, that's it. That's what I love doing. So I'm excited.
Well, and you've kind of built your life around that, and that you have a skate park in your backyard. You have a skate park in your office.
Yeah.
Like, and that to me is almost the dream, is that literally have everything you want around you all the time. You don't have to keep on looking for more. You don't need to go find more fame. You don't need to go find more money, because what you love is right there.
Yeah, well, exactly. But also, it's right there, but also my family is there. So those are the most important things in my life, is my family and riding skateboards. And so the idea that all of what I'm doing allows me to spend time with those things in my life, that's the dream. Like, that is literally living the dream for me.
And so how young are your youngest kids?
My daughter just turned 13.
Okay.
All the boys are either in college or have graduating college now.
Or have already, because you have one that's my age. Tell me this, because I think about the later millennials that are my age. We have a certain appreciation for the world that this younger generation doesn't have, that one that I know you have, and it's the appreciation for the analog world that once was, the world without the internet, without mobile phones, without social media, and that appreciation for that lack of constant connectivity allows you, in my view, to appreciate delayed gratification more. It allows you to work for longer term goals, because there isn't this you understand what the world is like without instant gratification in front of you. Looking at your youngest children compared to your eldest ones, do you see a difference in how they are able to appreciate the world? Because your youngest kids don't know this world without the digital world. They don't they don't know the analog one, and it must be harder for them to delay gratification. Is that something that you see?
Yes and no. I think that through my example, especially with my daughter, who would be right in the age of likes and comments and whatever. So she sees my approach, and she sees how I've developed my skills and how I've learned to expand upon them. And I think that just that example helps her a lot with knowing that, yes, there is more of a longer.
Well, she sees the consistency.
Sure.
She understands that you're a skateboarder.
But definitely she's caught up in
social media
and whatever else. So I think she walks the line, but I've definitely seen others where it's like everything has to happen now, and it's just like, no, let's try to build something for a career.
Yeah. Well, and I see that being very challenging for a young skater, because skateboarding is not about instant gratification. Like, you're never gonna nail a hard new trick the first time.
Yeah, but also with skating, and especially if you're an influencer or you're out there and you're being successful, you're only as good as your last big trick or last viral video. So you got to step it up consistently, and skate fans are fickle.
And it must be almost harder now, because so much has already been done that to be seen as new or novel in skating, you can't be the best person on the basketball court at that time. Like in basketball, even though obviously the level of basketball has probably gone up, but like in order to be seen as something really incredible in skateboarding, you have to do something that no one's ever done with a skateboard.
Yeah, or just embrace your unique hook, whatever that may be, whatever your style is, or whatever trick you've got that most people don't. Take that as far as you can take it, because it's hard to stand out now.
And I imagine going back to the social media is that, there's probably a bigger personality component now, in that because the social media.
Oh yeah,
that's where you get the brand deals.
Yeah,
that's
how
you sustain
plenty
yourself.
of people who are successful. They aren't the best skaters.
Yeah,
but their personalities and their skating is solid, and they're killing it.
So like what I love about you is that you're a very, humble, mild-mannered, like you're not like super big personality, like a lot of the people you see on social media these days. Do you think you would have had a harder time if you had come of age as a skater today, standing out as a skater, simply because, such a big part of what can capture the attention of fans and of sponsors is that big personality making the crazy viral content?
Yeah, maybe, but I think that I would have, I assume I just would have been more focused on competition.
Right,
and that's where I would have thrived, because that is where I made my original success.
Right, because you actually weren't the stylistic guy. You weren't looking cool. You were actually just all about pushing the limit of the skate.
I was fierce competitor, and I was able to perform under pressure eventually. And that's what created this foundation for success. So I think that, I don't know if I would have tried to been doing TikTok dances. I would have just been out there like, when's the next contest? All right, let's go. Let's train. Let's do it.
But one thing I have noticed, I mean, if you've had incredible longevity in your career, but you have actually adapted to social media. I mean, you have a big following on social media. You seem very comfortable. One thing you told me is that you manage all of your social media.
I do.
Have your kids played a part in your ability to stay relevant in social media, like, creating content? Because that's something that doesn't necessarily come naturally. Even I kind of struggle with content. I don't get TikTok. TikTok's like the first app that's ever made me feel old. How do you kind of stay abreast of these trends? How, obviously there's the authenticity component, but even just feeling, comfortable on social media, it doesn't come naturally, especially as you get into your 30s, 40s, now 50s.
I think mostly I just try to, I try to keep my ear to the ground and read the vibe of what's out there. And for sure, I understand what you're saying about TikTok. My TikTok I'm not as active on it, and obviously I'm way older. But I've figured it out enough with the help of my daughter, just in terms of how the functionality works. And every once in a while, I'll have something out there that'll go viral, and that's great. But I do feel like I just try to watch where people are going and what's more effective. Like I have a different approach to all the different platforms.
Yeah.
So my Instagram is not the same as my Twitter.
Right.
And it's not the same as Facebook, and it's certainly not the same as TikTok, because I know how the audience reacts in each one of those different platforms enough that it's kind of like, okay, I need to tweak it this way. And it's not manipulative. It's just more like, I know what you guys want to see here.
Right.
And you don't want to hear about that over here. And that's fine. But yeah, I guess the biggest success as of late was Avril Lavigne hit me up to do a TikTok with her. She actually messaged me on Instagram, said, "Hey, I want to make you my first TikTok." With Skater Boy.
Oh, one of my favorite songs.
Right. So, so, I'm way older and whatever, and Skater Boy is a little more pop than what I'm usually associated with. But I was like, that would be funny. Like, that would be awesome. Let's do it. Because I just instinctually know that people are going to think that's ridiculous. Like, how you're in her video, Skater Boy, like what is going? You know what I mean?
But I mean, Skater Boy was big when
it was massive.
when skating was blowing up.
But the thing is, I was already old then.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
you weren't a Skater Boy.
It wasn't like I was in my 20s, like skater. It was just like I was already established.
She
as
didn't
a
write the
skater.
song about you.
Right. And so, but she did say that. She's like, the original Skater Boy. Let's do it. I was like, yeah, that'll be funny. So I went up to her house in Malibu. She has a mini ramp at her house.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So she actually loves skating.
She skates, yeah. And so we shot this little thing. It took 20 seconds.
Yeah.
It's the most viral video I've had in years.
I need to find that. That's amazing.
And it's her only TikTok as of right now.
Well, it's hard if you make a viral TikTok, your first TikTok, then you feel like you have to.
Well, I think that she's already got a pretty big fan base.
Yeah.
It's going to be loyal to whatever she does. But
no, but I think
but it was super fun. And there were a lot of people, not a lot of people, but a few people in my life were just like, "Wait, what are you doing? Like, how old are you?" I was like, it'll be funny. It'll be cool.
Well, but I think, I think I've said this to you before, but I think whether you're an entrepreneur, you're a visual artist, a musician, or even an athlete, we're all very similar in that we're creators. We're all trying to bring new things into the world and sell people on our vision. I mean, it's what makes our personalities all very similar, is that when you are trying to pave a pathway in whatever you're doing, you are a creator, and finding new ways to create, you have to do things that make people ask questions. If you're actually going to break ground, change the world, if you will, you have to do things that make people scratch their head. If there aren't people questioning what you're doing, it's very likely that what you're doing is innovative
that it's going to fade away for sure. I agree with that.
And so it's all in a sense a form of artistry. But so talking about your relevance, I mean, I think you've always probably been the cool dad, right? Like for
I'm to an extent. My life and the things I do provide opportunities to my kids that are rare, that are special, to go to certain places or to have to go to movie premieres or to amusement parks or travel and stuff like that. Yes, but at the same time, that very success pulls me away from them often. So, is that cool? Not when you from an outside perspective, because you're not always available. But at the same time, I mean, the cool thing about how far skating has come is that all of our kids skate.
Yeah.
And they don't do it because of me. They do it because their friends skate and they love it. And so whenever we travel, our first stop
is a skate park.
Yeah. And I'm not dragging them along. They're telling me that they want to go to the Spark.
Have they ever struggled with kind of the fame that you have?
I think that there's unwanted attention on them sometimes, and sometimes they'll try to distance themselves from that or my name.
Well, and they maybe don't want to be Tony Hawk's kid. They want to be
exactly. Yeah, of course. Yeah, and I will insert myself as much as they want. So, like, one of my kids he has a really successful music career, but he doesn't. He asked me not to be not that I'm not involved, but just not to like, be like share it on social media. You know what I mean? Like, hey, here's a new album.
He wants to do it himself.
He wants to do it himself, and he doesn't. And I absolutely respect that
because I remember. I mean, he went pro at a young age. This is his same son, right?
Different son.
Okay.
But like he had my other son has another one of my sons has a band, and he wants me to promote it. Because
because it helps.
They're trying to make they're making a tour, they're making an album, and I'm hugely proud of all of them. Yeah. So I would love to help if they want me to, but like I said, I've seen how it can affect them adversely, and I don't want that for them if that's how they feel about it.
Got it. Now, thinking, because I just want to be mindful of time. You do have other obligations, and we got to go shoot some Made Man content.
By the way, you were talking about Made Man, and I'm not going to make this a whole promo, but I do appreciate that you brought me on board, because I can't say that I am the model example for someone for skincare, because I really didn't start taking care of my skin until you gave me Made Man. That was the absolute truth.
Right.
And I using it.
And you were tweeting all these great tweets, but people were like, oh, I thought you would look younger. I'm like, Tony, because we had a relationship before this, let's see if you like my product.
Yeah, well, it definitely has helped for sure. But I mean, I'm 53. What you see is what you get. But I've been using it since you gave it to me every day, and it's definitely helped.
Well, and talking about not selling out, like I knew when I came to you about this, I wasn't going to be like, you need to be an ambassador for Mademan. I was like, you need to try my product because I want to see if we can help your skin. And, it took us a couple of months to see whether you actually liked it. You could get into it. But, I think you're actually one of the perfect ambassadors for the brand because you are someone that, never took care of his skin. You had a crazy...
But I wish that I had known this when I was your age.
Right.
You know what I mean? So that maybe I would have had a different outcome.
And we have to get that message through. But look, if you can keep your skin how it is for the next 20 years, you've done yourself a service.
Yeah, that's where I'm heading. That's what I'm hoping for.
And so hopefully the tweets will be reversed, and you'll have kids saying, in 10 years, oh, I would have thought you looked older. You know?
Well, the whole thing with the tweets is I only share the ones that are funny encounters. Because people think that somehow I never get recognized or that I complain about not getting recognized. There's plenty of times when it's like, oh, you're Tony Hawk? What's up? High five. Or let's get a selfie. Those aren't the ones I share.
Yeah.
Because they're not as
No, it's the funny, quirky encounters.
Yeah.
But let's go to your legacy here and where we are today with literally weeks away from the Olympics. You're about to fly to Tokyo. There's a new generation, people are talking about Nyjah, who, the next or even bigger than Tony Hawk, which I know you don't care about. That's probably a great thing for you. But thinking about where skateboarding is going and the legacy you want to leave, what are your hopes for the future, given this just storied career you've had?
I think that what I would like to see going forward is other countries embracing skateboarding, because skateboarding is focused mostly on specific regions where they have skate parks, where they have support for skateboarding. And I feel like the Olympics could be the catalyst to truly opening it up to worldwide attention. And maybe there would be more skate parks in Thailand or in Africa. And that's the exciting element to all that for me. And I don't know, that's not necessarily my legacy, but that's what I would like to see for the future of skateboarding.
Well, and I know it's been probably slightly frustrating for you because the reason why they're not doing vert, which is where you made your career, which is on those massive half pipes, is they're not available in most countries. Right. So they couldn't make it an Olympic sport because, I mean, do you think you would have even been competing given what the Olympic skateboarding is?
I think I would have, I mean, if
I
was younger, I would have just been skating whatever's available.
Yeah.
And so, that'd been awesome to have a chance to go to the Olympics.
Because there's more to add to the Olympics. There's more skating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do believe that after Tokyo, skateboarding is going to be one of the highlights, especially with the younger viewership. And so I feel like they're going to want to either highlight it more going forward. What is the next one in Paris? Yeah. And possibly add an event if they can. There's all these crazy bylaws, but I feel like there would be a disservice to not add vertical skating, because then the home audience could truly see flying.
And so this is where I think a part of your legacy comes in. You're going to keep on advocating for skateboarding. You're going to say, we need to keep on pushing this forward. The Olympics are a starting point, not the end point.
No, not at all. Yeah, the Olympics are just the beginning.
I think that's what's so exciting when you do give your life to something, is that there's no, it's almost similar to that, that experience of pursuing money or fame. But the difference is one is fulfilling and one's not. You can set a goal for yourself in terms of making money and then, or getting a certain level of fame, but then you want more, but you're not fulfilled. The nice thing about doing truly what you love is that you can set a goal for yourself. You can get to the Olympics, and you want more, but you are also fulfilled at the same time. It's it isn't like you're chasing more because you don't have enough. It's because why not? It's it just makes
it fun. It makes it, that's it is doing what you love, and that's the success. And so money is great, but it's not the goal. And so when you get it, awesome, but it just mostly the idea that you're still doing the thing that you love, and you would do it for free any day of the week.
Yeah. I mean, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you, because I think you really are, in my mind, the ultimate made man. You were my childhood hero, which it really, it's not an exaggeration. I had all your video games. I had the magazines. I had the Birdhouse skateboard. But actually getting to know you as an adult in the past 3 years, 4 years, has been a tremendous honor. But I actually, it's so funny. They say don't meet your heroes, but I actually have come to admire you more as we've gotten to know each other and work together. And I really think that, as I think about my own career, doing this interview, which I could do for another hour or two, but we can't, it is such a great demonstration of everything I hope we can show on this show, which is, how to be a man, which is more than just your career. It's more than necessarily your family or your money. It's the sum of all these things and just figuring that out. It's this iterative process that never just stops at one point.
It's constant work in progress.
It is this constant evolution. Well, Tony, thank you so much for coming on this show.
Thanks for having me.
I hope we can do it again in a year or two, and I look forward to keep on working with you, and we're gonna keep on checking in on your skin because I think it's glowing now. We're gonna go shoot some content, and
all right, you're gone too far now.
Well, no, you've got good lighting. I mean, it's not all the skin, but I think there's so much to learn from what you've done, and I hope to keep on learning from you, and hope I can provide some value back. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thanks for sharing everything.
I appreciate it, man. This has been What Makes a Man. This is Tony Hawk. I hope you enjoyed the show, and keep on watching because we're going to have a bunch more great guests.